Hi, my name is Benedict for Higher Hertz. This video is essentially a continuation from the last one. If you haven't already worked it out, I'm increasingly working things in what we might call story arcs. So I'm stitching the videos together. Sometimes that's been broken because videos have come out in different order, but I've spoken to the Higher Hertz upper team, and much as possible, we're looking at keeping all of these programs together so that we look at the bigger picture and how they relate to each other. The last video was Audio Damage's Rough Rider, which is a deliberately rather heavy-handed compressor. This is completely the opposite direction. This is a compressor that's designed to be as transparent as possible. They mark it as being a mastering compressor, but you can use it anywhere. You can use it anyhow you like. But it will tend to be more delicate, more subtle. Even when you're pummeling the material, it will still tend to sound like it's not really working as hard as something like a Rough Rider, even though it may be doing more squishification. Different approaches, different sorts of sound. So what we've got here is obviously a few more knobs and buttons, and there are some real changes in what this does, and we'll go over them. To start with, let's just run through what we're going to do. Yes, we're using the same piece of music as last time. And this is using the default setting, as I did with Rough Rider. Now with Rough Rider, the default setting in all of these compressors brutalized the music. So we went through and made it work better. In this case, the default setting is no activity, and I think that is super for a compressor like this, because if you come in with already, let's say, a smashed mess, then while you may go, oh, but it gives you the wrong sense of how am I going to improve, beautify, enhance the story that this is telling when it's already decided for you what story it should be telling. So the fact that it has nothing as its default is to me a really good thing, particularly for this style of compressor. Where's it from? It is from Tokyo Dawn, so it's TDR, and as they're very, very clear, it is designed to manipulate the dynamic range whilst carefully preserving the original tone, timbre, and punch of the musical signal. So where Rough Rider kind of reaches down inside and just pulls up the small and makes it big and gives you that really splatified kind of approach and changes the signal a lot in the process, this you can work very hard with very minimal change to the signal, which can make you think that the compressor's not really doing much at all. If you judge what's a good compressor by, say, what Rough Rider does, then you're going to find the Kotelnikov almost seems to be a nothing compressor, because it doesn't seem to much matter what you do, you don't hear that change that you get from heavy-handed compression. Being a Tokyo Dawn product, there is a gentleman's edition which gives you a few more features. Otherwise, the basic version is completely free. Now, if you're using this a lot, then I'd strongly encourage you to buy the gentleman's edition, because not only does it encourage Tokyo Dawn to be making more stuff, because they don't do this for the fun of it. This is a business, and that is right. But if you are using them to support you, then you need to remember to support them. One of the fundamental errors that I see a lot of people in this business wanting to grow make is that they don't address their back line. And now you need 4 pillars to grow, and there's stuff about this, but if you don't have a good sense of who you are and what you offer, you'll fail. If you don't have a good backline and don't support those people, then you will fail. Same goes with your fans on the other end. So one of your important pillars, and I see people fail on this, is that they show up and they say, what can I get for free? I know you're never going to succeed in this business because you're not building a back line. You're not going to go to fight and you're not going to say, I've got this that's special and protect them. So if you're getting usage out of this or any other device, make sure you pay for it, because that way the message you're sending is, I support my backline. When you support your backline, those people will support you. They will come to you with cool things that you wouldn't otherwise get. Encourage that. So, different kind of device. Now let's look at the real single obvious difference in this, and then we'll run through the good and bad. Then we get into the real meat of the program, which is running through this mix, showing the device in action, what we can do with it, where it shines, where it doesn't do the same job. The big thing that we might see here is we've got our usual threshold, attack, release, what have you, but we've got 2 release knobs, and then we've got this peak crest thing. Kind of odd. What we have inside here is essentially 2 compressors, and they can be summed to work together in a mixed mode. So simplifying, if we put this fully into peak mode, and my understanding is that Rough Rider would be a peak compressor, then we get a pretty typical compressor. We can move it into RMS mode, and you don't find RMS compressors as often. They tend to behave differently, and people tend to be wanting that instant attack. But RMS doesn't work that way. Let's have a look at our meters above. Let's roll. You see there that we've got 2 readouts. We've got one which is peaking here at, say, -12, and one which is peaking up at around the 0 dB. Now, the one that seems to be peaking at -12 is a VU, or an RMS, standing for root mean square, which means average. Peak is that instant moment where it's at, so therefore changes really fast. And root mean square is an average. Now, why the average is really super important is because that average matches how, as humans, we perceive sound. We have no memory for level. We can't hear something and say, oh, it was this many dB. We can compare things. We can hear a Boeing and we can hear a mouse and go, well, chances are that mouse was an awful lot smaller than that Boeing, because we can compare the two. When we're truly experienced, like I can listen to something that somebody's put up on a forum or something, and straight away kind of go, yeah, it's probably 6 dB down, because I'm used to that difference. But I can't tell you for a fact that it's 5.983 dB down, because there's no way of the human mind telling this thing. We can work comparatively. And RMS is so important because it gives us a sense of how we perceive level in a real world situation. And up until the 80s, basically all metering for all mixing, therefore all the true classic records, were mixed on VU alone. I remember when I first got into my first studio where I was being trained, the guy was like, look, I've got some peak meters. Yeah, you sometimes get the little LED that would light up on your VU meter to say, well, look, you've hit peak. But these were actual LED meters like we're used to here. And he'd spent a lot of money to actively put them inside his mixing desk. So the VU is the default state for mixing. The peak is the modern state for mixing. And while people spend a lot of time looking at the peak, so if we put this just into peak and going, oh, well, that's how I mix, they don't realize how much damage they're doing, because in reality, this is the number that matters. That's telling me that I've got what feels like a full signal. If I go above that, it starts to feel like an overloud signal. If I go below that, it starts to feel like an unfull signal. No reason why you shouldn't do that, but these days, the great thing is we can do both. Now, like I said, and I'll pop a graphic up here, when your compressor is looking at a peak signal, it's effectively taking this very instant in time. as much as is allowable with physics. Please don't be the Nigel No Friends who has to be a pedantic Peter who needs to tell me all about how something or other else. If somebody's really interested, they can go and read this stuff. They can go to Wikipedia and go off from there to read rocket science. I don't need to be told that I'm wrong because I know I'm right. I am generalizing here for people to go off. If we took that instant in time, then that's our peak. But as I said, it's kind of useless. It's important in a DAW simply because we can't let those peaks go over, because once they go over, then they can do nasty things. But there is no situation in which you really should ever be allowing that to happen if you've set your things up right anyway. So, peak measures this very instant in time. It's fast, it's instant, it's transient. RMS, however, reads over a period of time. So it's comparatively saying, I'm hearing that bowing, I'm hearing that mass, and here's the average that we've got in our room when we've got the bowing over there and the mass over there. So a compressor moves quite differently when it's working on those human-style averages, which actually happen to match how a VU meter moves, which is super convenient, which is how the VU meters came to be as they are. Then the compressor moves quite differently, and it can give a gorgeous result and be a lot more what we might consider transparent or musical as a result. Now, this compressor allows us to hear and make decisions on the peak or on the RMS. Crest is quite literally the difference between the 0 and the -12 reading here. Yes, I know there's a number up there, but I'm only going to read one of them because it's easy. If you're looking for your crest factor for a really nice dynamic mix, then your peaks are going to be sitting at around the -1 to 0, and your RMS is going to be sitting around the -12. And you're good to go. You're golden. So the ability to run this as either a full RMS compressor is great. You'll see that happen. Or to run as a combination of the two makes this a very, very interesting compressor. The other thing that I particularly like, the soft knee is quite nice, and we'll explain that as we go, is the gain reduction information. So let's look at the good and bad and then dig into the product and get to understand it a lot better. The good is that there is lots of control. You really have a lot of control as to how you attack your signal. And by the word attack, I do not mean in the same way as the Rough Rider. It's allowing you to be very precise in how you massage the dynamic shape, kind of like an ADSR that you're applying to the shape of your sound as it comes through. You'll see some precise ADSR type work, and you'll see some very broad work in this. So that's a great thing. There is so much control over a lot of settings. The metering is truly superb. You can go from a big meter to a very precise meter. Truly super. As you see, that was probably a big issue that I had with Rough Rider. Here, there's more metering than you could need, which is superb. It is free, but again, if you are using this regularly, free means it's free to use. Free does not mean, oh, look, we're giving you $1 million for free. Go have a nice life. You don't even need to say thanks. That's not free. That's a kind of stealing. Wherever you take value, you must return value. If you do not return value, you are shooting yourself in the foot. You will never develop a music career because people will go, well, this guy's just a taker, and nothing will come back. Your public image, like I'm just watching the Professor of Rock's video on Sir William Broad's, he's not knighted, on Billy Idol's Rebel Yell, the wonderful Steve Stevens, and I learned some stuff about Steve that I did not know. More respect to the guy again. That on the surface, of course, Billy Idol seems like a... and Steve's public persona was quite sort of... But in reality, they're quite different from what that public persona is. So if you want to have a public persona of being an utter, go for it. But in reality, if you want to work with people and have success, free does not mean that you return no value. Value must come back. I know I'm pushing that, but I see so many people burn themselves day in, day out in groups and forums with expecting free stuff, and no one got to work with them. The negatives. Well, we got to put some in because otherwise it's not fair. I can't find how to resize. It says there's a way to resize, so I don't know whether I'm just doing it wrong or because I just don't have the latest version or something or other. But I couldn't find it, but not a biggie. It does resize. It is harder to make it sound brutal or compressory. This is not a bad, this is actually a great thing about the unit, that it's really achieving its aim, that it's very hard to make it sound compressory. It made it hard to sound like that or brutal kind of thing. It's not bad, it just means you got the wrong compressor, or you're using it the wrong way. But it is good to be able to point out that if you use this thinking you're going to get the same results as a Rough Rider type compressor, no, it's not going to happen. This is going to be one of the most transparent compressors you ever use, and it's an asset, so remember that. Looking into our track, we have the same track as before deliberately, so it makes it a little easier for you to compare. Let's start working our way through. We've got drums. No compression. We can see this ring around here which shows us where there is activity and signal. Push up into the ring, we start to see compressification happening. We can drill right in to get a very good sense of, well, I've probably got half a dB happening there. Let's go a little heavy-handed. And we'll push ourselves into just peak mode. Despite how aggressive we're being here, which is closer to, let's like 12 dB, that's really quite transparent. I just need to fix that. We're starting to get a little bit of crushiness, but that's because we're working incredibly fast. But it's not distorting in that common sort of a way. So this is what they mean by very transparent. We can be brutal with what we're doing and still end up with a surprisingly transparent result. This will not entirely lend itself to that kind of thing, but you can get there. Like, that's actually quite an interesting sound. Not a good sound, but it's an interesting sound. So just be aware it's going to feel quite different. Let's find a point where we feel like we're going to be enhancing our drums here. Now we are crushing quite a lot here. So this is where we really want to pull in an ability to roll off the low lows, the bass, so to speak, which means it's not going to have as much impact on the overall compression. That sounds fairly flat and consistent. We've now got a stronger sense of groove. There's no funkiness moving in this groove, but it's really showing what we've got quite nicely. There's a sense of movement and space in here. If we flip across to RMS, we get quite a different feel. Same attack, just a different way of releasing that signal. Quite similar. I'm going to leave a little bit of balance. It's working nicely. We can soften the knee. What a soft knee means is that when the signal hits its threshold, if there's no change to the knee, like a full hard knee, whatever we've set as the rate will instantly happen. So no compression or change to here, but the moment it goes above that line, let's say we've got that 5:1 we spoke about last time, we go from 0 compression, as in 5 dB is 5 dB, to 5 dB is 1 dB. And that transition can be problematic. It can be too obvious. So a soft knee says that we will allow a dB range around that threshold. And there are 3 main ways, or possible ways, in which it's likely to be arranged, or combinations thereof. So one is you can have that, let's say we set up 3 dB as our range for our soft knee, meaning that over 3 dB of travel around the threshold, then we will sort of edge our way into the full compression amount. We can set it around, in which case 1.5 above and 1.5 below. We can set it below, so once it hits that threshold, it's going to be the full 5:1, but it's going to work its way in. It's going to sort of smooth its way in, starting 3 dB below. Or you could go above, but it's rare to find a total above. Most of them will be sort of here or a little bit more here. And that softens the transition between no compression and compression. Sometimes a hard knee sounds great. Sometimes a soft knee sounds better. It's more transparent, especially if the soft knee is below the threshold. Then sometimes you can end up with more compression once you get a really big knee, because you're actually traveling over a bigger area. And that seems to indicate here that the knee drops more below the threshold than above. So it's a way of softening the feel of your compression a little bit. You change that turnover point so it's not so hard. I'm happy enough with the sound there. It's giving more clarity, more gloss, more polish, more proneness to what we've got. And that's beauty, and that's what I'm looking for here. Great. Now let's listen to this bass. Now remember, this bass is kind of long. It just through the whole thing. That was deliberate. So we need to shape this a little bit. Let's go heavy-handed. Relatively slow attack is important here because we actually want that punch at the beginning of it. We want this to be loud at the beginning and then drop down. We also want the release to be fairly long. If our attack's too long, it loses punch. It just kind of becomes nothing. I don't think we want a soft knee here. Let's look at RMS. That works nicer, as anticipated. The RMS here, because we've just got this one log, we're trying to reshape the log based on its level information. So the attack is pulsing nicely now. The soft knee is nice, it smooths it off, but I actually want to build some punch here. So between peak, which is a little rigid, and RMS, which flows, I'm going to go with more RMS than peak. Peak gives it a little bit of, and the RMS gives it the smooth flow. We don't want to crush this too much. I was just finding the shape. That's probably pretty good. Let's listen to it in situ. Now that's moving nicely. We've got the drums and the bass have been composed so that they're pocketed already, as in the main points in the bass are the main points are in the drums. The rhythms are pocketed already, but this is helping to clarify that groove. Again, we're beautifying this. We're polishing it in a good way without getting into any of that kind of splatification of crushing things. Everything sounds kind of exactly the same as it was before, but kind of groovier. So if we just pop this in solo here, kind of flat. Now we've got and that's good, because that's what we want. We want people to feel that, because that's what we're doing. While this was written as a sort of an EDM-y type thing, it will not sound as EDM-y in this instance, because this just doesn't work for that sound. So we're going to end up with something that's got some elements of a light EDM and a lot of elements of classic rock, because these are the techniques that you will use. Very easy for you to go, well, I'm never going to use those techniques because I only do EDM, but that's a real problem with EDM, and part of the reason why essentially it's dead, because it doesn't try new things. It doesn't have any freedom or space to move. So now we've got this. Let's look at bussing the pair of these together. Again, we'll go into peak, no knee. We'll be heavy-handed because we're looking for the groove. Interestingly, that works quite nicely. It's very light in the sense that we're letting 180 milliseconds through, so just basically everything's coming through, and just towards the end it's just ducking a little bit. If we looked for a shorter time, that's something like that. It does feel very like this, but because we're overdoing it. Let's look at our RMS. Again, we're getting a very, but that's kind of cool. Well, what if we go out? We've got a bigger, more loping. So the short is giving us a very, but the long is giving us a bigger, more loping kind of feel. I actually like that in this instance. That's more pronounced. The RMS is smoother. We'll take a little from each side. A little bit of soft knee means that we can actually go harder, but we can soften that transition. Now what's happening here is that with the longer attack here, we're actually moving almost more at the length of the bass riff than we are at the drum riff. And there's no right or wrong here. EDM would be moving far more at the drum riff level. Here, I'm just kind of liking this, and so I'm thinking I'm happy to move at the bass groove level. So we've got a more loping kind of a feel. If you've been wondering, the delta button, what the delta button does is it takes the signal, it takes the change we've made to the signal, invert them, and just plays us the difference. In many ways, it's useless information, but the fact that it's there can be useful. It tells us how much we're affecting. In this case, you're actually hearing our groove only inverted, like the X-ray version of our groove. It's where white is black, black is white. Sort of useless information, as I say, but it does tell you how much of your signal you're changing. That's actually quite a lot. Cool. Wet dry mix just allows you to roll some of the dry signal back in. Anyone who follows me knows that I'm not a big fan of the parallel or New York style compression where you brutalize a signal and then put some of the original back in. Yes, technically it works, but just don't brutalize in the first place, is my point of view. I know you can double dip, and that's okay. Go for it if you want. So we've now got our rhythm section working nicely. So even that alone improves our groove, but as soon as we put in these, we've gotten a nice balance. That's good. I'm not going to play with any of the levels here. I played with some of the levels last time in the headphones, got out of the headphones. I was like, what was I thinking? Don't mix in cans. Rhythm section done. So now we'll look at this pluck. This has the echoes going into the compressor. And this is not actually the lead of the piece, even though it appears to be at the moment, but it's a phrase, and we need to make that phrase work. Remember the ADSR thing? What we're doing here is at the drum level, we were kind of working here. We kind of worked on per note on the bass when we were working on the bass, and then we moved into the rhythm section. We ended up working a bit more on the total groove of the lope of the bass line. Here we need to work on the whole phrase. So rather than just ADSR for each kick or snare or whatever, we are ADSRing for the phrase. And basically each chord movement is the beginning of a phrase. So, peak, we want to let a bit through on the beginning of this because we want people to hear this and then follow it. So we're looking for a little bit of pumping. Okay, and if we go across to RMS, yeah, we're losing level, of course. Cool. I'm going to get rid of that soft knee because I actually really want people to hear and feel this boom, ba-dum, 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 boom, ba-dum, 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 because that's the whole idea here. Kind of flat. we've enveloped that. That's the whole thing that we're looking for there. I might even want to consider getting rid of that. Not that the bass is a particular issue here. It's alright, doesn't seem to make any particular difference. Hear how that suddenly has more presence, because the beginning of each phrase, and I'm using that term a little loosely, is now pulled forward. So it's reaching out and saying, follow me, follow me, follow me, follow me. And we're masters of following things. You know, we're crouching in the bushes waiting for some leaves to move to tell us that there's wabbits. As soon as we see some leaves move, we can actually follow the rabbit. We need to see the leaves move in the first place. So this is a case of saying, here, and then people will follow us even though it's gotten quieter. And by constantly go, woo, it's actually constantly pulling us back to see this thing. That's good move. And the string. Remember, we struggled quite some with the audio damage, the Rough Rider with the string, because they're really not suited to each other. So we will get a different sort of an outcome this time. To be fair, I have also used Slick EQ, where I used Fuzz +3 last time to change the sound of the string. And this time I thought, you know, if I'm doing the TDR thing, let's use one of their toys. Nothing. So we're warming our sound up with the Slick EQ, using a combination of EQing to shape how things go, and a little bit of the saturation that it does. Played with the different models, and that was the one I kind of liked. You just try them and see what feels like it fits your situation. Obviously, it doesn't bring up as much of the echo that's built into the Thor sound as does the fuzz. But we still get a really, really nice workable sound without the hiss. Let's see what we're going to do here. Peak mode. Now you can straight away hear that that's juddering. It's like horrible pumping. Not good. But if we soften our knee, see how instantly that gets so much smoother. This is what knees are for. No knee means that the transition's quite sudden, especially when we're being heavy-handed like this. But adding in the knee means that we get a small amount of compression leading up to a larger amount of compression. And this is a really nice thing to do for pad strings where you need to control levels. Look how much we're controlling the level here. It's like 8 dB with minimal sense of squish. If we move to the RMS, we've still got some judder, but surprisingly smooth. If we slow down our attack, then it means that it's taking a broader sense of what's going on, so it's not going to move as fast. And really what we're looking for in this pad is a nice sense of even. Where I'm looking to ADSR most things, in this I'm actually looking to un-ADSR this. If there are any movements in this, which there aren't, but if you can get movement with chorus, phases, flanges, they can give you peaks and what have you, and troughs, then this is a way of helping to even out across the board. Keep our soft knee up. I'm going to leave that where it is. We've lost some level, but we really don't need to be that unkind. The sound sounds fuller because we're just kind of pushing it down. We may have lost some treble, but we've got a feeling of more body and bulk. Which is going to be kind of useful in the situation because it's the middle of the piece. Again, I'm not going to turn the level down because last time I did it, it was wrong. So that's pretty good. That is our mix. We'll run through and kind of A-B, but you're not going to notice a ton of difference. Definitely not in the let's compress it heavily sort of a way. We're not meant to. So let's listen. New compressed mix. Our levels are where they were before. Let's undo everything. Bit of level gain perhaps. Feels like that string is gaining a little bit of level, maybe. I think it's more just because it's compressing, so the transient information a little less of, so it feels bulkier as well. One of the advantages of this kind of compression that it seems to sound the same, but it changes its feel a little bit, but without being too over the top. We've got a greater sense of being solid and assured. That's what we want here. More groove. Everything's just kind of straight through here. You can really hear the do-do-do-do-do-do-do that pulses. Grooving. That bass actually sounds like it's lower. It's got more of a underneath it. Now, it may be in part because we've rolled some of this out, but I shouldn't imagine that we've taken a lot of bass off this because we've largely left that in. But our bass here has managed to somehow start to sound fuller, richer. That's a great thing. Our numbers are right where they were, which is great. We're doing this without really changing our numbers, which is good. We're getting a really nice natural dynamic to our piece. So let's look at the masters. This is finalizing, not mastering. Now, first thing, this compressor is not for leveling. This is why it got invented limiters or clippers. While this compressor will, and I mean the Kotelnikov, will limit to a certain extent, if we get stupid heavy-handed, get rid of this and get pretty fast. Look, it's kind of limiting. Does it sound better? No, it sounds like, well, not better. I see so many people as they put their mastering compressor in, going into this kind of compression, going, oh, but I need to increase. No, this compressor in this position, any compressor in this position is not about that. It's a bus compressor, just like what we did here. We're looking for groove. This is why it's referred to as glue compression. At the moment, we've got all these parts, these instruments. We've given them nice movement and everything as a mix. Now we need to bring it together. Normally we would have reverb. I have no idea why we've got no reverb in this mix. We just don't. But this is where you turn it into one. When you listen to older classic songs that have lasted 50 years and people still love them. Let's pick Johnny Cash, why not? The guy was a hell of a performer, but in terms of the mixing, there's very little technology in there, but when you listen to that song, there is one song. So many people I listen to their attempts at mixing, and even things that get commercial release these days, it's like being asked to listen to 12 different things. So that's the equivalent of having your child come up to you, they've got a bucket with some bricks and they do like this in front of you and you're just like, it's not nice. A song is one song. If you want to release 12 songs, it's called an album. 12 separate songs, each an individual song. Don't try to do 12 different songs in one song. It might seem clever, but it's not clever. I had somebody who posted something, asked for feedback on it, and he had taken the path of very little reverb, fair enough, but it felt dry and unlocated in the first place. And then he'd left certain parts of his drum kit out of that reverb and overpanned them. And it wasn't creative overpanning, it was just like, I'm just going to splash this out. So not only was I presented with things that were sort of out here, but I was presented with things that weren't in the same room as themselves. So a drum kit that was partially in this room, but it was in that room at the same time. That is creepy. Do not do this. So the whole idea and the reason that the SSL glue or bus compressor is so revered is because it was a super simple, easy way to do it. It was already being done for one reason or another, whether people were aware of it, of pulling that whole piece in so that it moves as one. So now we start to look at how to move as one. We will be heavy-handed. I've shown this lots of times and I'll keep showing it. How do we make this piece feel like it moves as one? That's interesting. It's lurching because we're too aggressive, but it's pulling out the kind of thing. If we're looking for dance hits, great. But often at this point, we're wanting the whole song. So see, as I did with the rhythm bus there, I looked more at the longer feel of the bass line, so I wanted the whole thing to kind of lope. Here we want the whole piece to come together. So we might go out really quite long. So you can see by my body's reaction, we've got this not grooving or lurching at each kick. We've got the section, so it's maybe a bar that we're grooving across a bar perhaps. That's good. That's nice. I'm going to go with that. It's heavy-handed right now, but that's okay. Let's see what happens in RMS. Same thing. I'm not going to soften the knee because I'm going to soften the threshold. We could go into a very soft knee and reduce our threshold, but I'm not going to. I'm going to do the minimum damage. Little from column A, little from column B. Let's go back to a much nicer threshold. Zoom in. Notice a big difference. Now I've actually lost about a dB here, but the track sounds louder because we've got that punch and pull, punch and pull. The track is now rocking itself. The whole track is rocking. And I don't specifically mean rocking and rolling because it's not that kind of track, but it is. It's rocking. And that makes it constantly get our attention again. It's the inverse of our groove. Yes, let's... There we go. Now, hopefully, I should have made a big deal of this at the beginning, but I assume people are doing this properly. Hopefully you are using good studio monitors in your studio to watch these programs. Failing that, cursed headphones. But you won't get the right feel. As I know, as I said, I made decisions in the Rough Rider, which once I got around to speakers, that was wrong. but you do need to hear. If you're trying to watch this on a phone or something like that, that's fine. If you're sitting on the train and using your time productively, brilliant. But when you go home, watch it again, listen to this carefully, and take your tools out, whichever tools you use, and try this very carefully till you can feel the movement. Because what we've done is we've changed our piece quite a bit. Let's go across the board. This is where we've landed. Good numbers. Raw composition. The music's, we'll say, good because we're mixing it. But once we start putting our suddenly we've got more depth, more movement overall, but the piece doesn't seem to have particularly changed. So if we had recorded, or if people cared about these particular instruments, let's say, oh, that's Thor, it's like a Rickenbacker or something that people really want to hear that instrument as it is, then this is the right decision to make. We're not saying we're going to brutalize you and turn you into something else. Sometimes that's cool, but sometimes that's absolutely the wrong decision. Then this is a way of having a lot of control over what's happening without changing the sound of the band. You hear that the sound in many ways between the before and after is kind of the same. Most people aren't going to notice the difference if they aren't paying attention. However, if they're remotely paying attention, they will feel more, oh, this is a cool song. And this is the essence of mixing. This shows you the complete opposite of the Rough Rider, which was we just make these sounds fatter and fuller and splattery and all of that. And I tried to really pull it back and achieve the same things. But here you see that we've got these things that people would say, oh, well, they're just flat and papery, those loops. And they are, because they're perfect. And we've given them extra movement. They seem a lot classier. Even though the movements here are small, overall the piece becomes more polished, classier than it was before. That's the kind of mixing that I love. It's not that I don't do creative things to move things around, to get them to do the right thing, but in terms of this, the composer, who's absolutely brilliant, it's me, had a story to tell. Not much of one in this case, it's pretty darn basic. But mixing is about beautifying that story, helping to tell that story. There's movement in there, and we've now pulled that movement out so much more. So bottom line, almost the complete mirror image of Rough Rider. If you were to have a toolkit, then it's probably worth having the pair of these. If you're looking for your drums to be the big smashed thing, then Rough Rider them. If you're looking to move and groove something without really changing the appearance of what's there, then look at the Kotelnikov thing. You did notice in the Rough Rider, I struggled a little with Rough Rider on the buses here and the master because it's not designed for those. Definitely Kotelnikov is going to do a better job there. And it gives you a lot more freedom because you can also balance between running as a peak or as an RMS. You can give yourself a crest in how things go. And remember, the crest is the difference between your peak and your RMS values. So really, really nice. The attention to detail in metering is just superb. It really could not be any better than this. And if your compression is too high, like your gain reduction is too high, it merely changes the scale of the meter to make it fit in. Really, really nicely done. The addition of the ability to tell the listening sidechain. I hate to say the word sidechain because people suddenly think ducking, man. It's like, no. Sidechain is the listening part of it. Ducking is the technique. Oh, one thing I had not covered was the stereo sensitivity. This knob is easy to kind of misunderstand. With a compressor and stereo signal, it's got really one of three ways of choosing how the signal is going to be listened to by the sidechain and therefore make decisions for the Leprechaun turning knob. The easy way is to take your stereo, sum it into mono, and say, there you go. We'll now move both sides exactly the same. Very easy. That's what most compressors will do. It works. It mirrors the real world quite nicely. The next option is to go with true stereo. So signal comes in, this compressor behaves completely independently of this compressor. So if we've got a loud signal, if we've got the drums over here and a bass flute here, then we're going to end up with a lot of movement here and no movement here. That's possibly good, because if we had summed to mono, then we may have issues. So a full separate stereo, but we can have some serious problems by the time we get up to a mix, like a master. And if we've got differences on each side, then we'll find the signal keeps tilting backwards and forwards. I have a limiter that allows me to decouple like that, and I like it a lot. For a lot of years there, I ran that as my final limiter and decoupled, and it gave a very nice little sparkle to the stereo wideness without getting into any of that malarkey about stereo mungification, because I will not have those things in the house there. I might use them on an instrument or on a bus, but generally I won't touch them. It's wrong, really wrong. I don't know why anyone invented those things. I guess it was so they had something to sell to the unsuspecting. People will hate me for that, but I don't know any working true professional, not like I'm a pro y'all, who actually uses those things, especially in mastering. So a little tiny bit of movement, if you have a true stereo, is kind of good, but it can become very problematic. So these guys have said, we're going to take the third method and give you a choice between the first and the third. The third method is, if you've got a real significant difference, it'll take the larger of the two and make the decisions from there. So we can either sum to mono, in which case we've got an average and move this way, or we can look at the two separate stereo things and choose whichever is the dominant and make the decisions for those. That's what that stereo sensitivity means. We can be literally summed to mono, which means it's going to be an average, or we can pull it out, and whichever is dominant at any given point in time in the left and right will set the overall. But at no point does it allow the compression to work like this, which I wouldn't mind a button for that, but it makes perfect sense that they don't allow it, because it would see this kind of movement in ways that, well, weren't so wise. So in case you wondered what that was, yeah, I meant to cover it earlier, but it's not a thing I ever particularly change, because I don't see a lot of the need for it. Not that it's a bad control, it's actually a fascinating control, and some people will probably get great value out of it. But that's how it works. It just changes how the sidechain hears the signal, which it's going to then send to the Leprechaun for the knob twiddling of the level. Really nice device, beautifully priced if you're starting to get into things, and the Gentleman's Edition is very fairly priced as well if you're going to continue to use this and support those who support you. Build your back line. Even if you never meet the TDR guys, you're building your back line, you're sending the right message. There are other functions which I won't get into here. I wanted to just go over with a companion to the Rough Rider to say, let's look at kind of the complete opposite and see how we go. Obviously, this is far more my style of a compressor, but as I said, there would be situations where this didn't really give that crushing overuse of compression sound, in which case I would pull in Rough Rider to do that bit, and then use Kotelnikov for the stuff that I don't want it to sound like it's being compressed, and particularly for buses and the like. Now, if you have any questions, make sure that you hit the subscribe button. Please remember, support your backline. If I'm helping you to learn to mix, then I'm your backline right now. Support this. Higher Hertz are the company that I work for. Support them so that they can continue to provide this information, and obviously to support me, because this is part of how I make my living, by training other people what gear works, how it works, why it might be a good decision for them, why it might not be a good decision for them. If you have any questions in general, not about TDR, please, because that's their thing, go get support from them. But if you have any general questions, ask on down below. Otherwise, go practice what you've learned and have a great